And then we come over here and let's see. Well, it says it's live. Oh, we got some viewers.
Yep.
Give it about 10 seconds. And do you see it on the page? I think there's a couple seconds delay.
Yeah, I can see it showing live on here.
Yeah. So do I. Sorry, I have everything full screen, so can't see everything behind it.
Well, I was checking on my phone.
I got you.
Yeah, there's like a little delay on it. We're here. Sometimes somebody helpful will hop on and be like, "We see it."
Oh. Yeah, I checked on my phone. I can see it live on my phone.
You see it live on your phone?
Yeah.
It's wild. I can't even see it live on my own channel, but
yeah, I don't see it like public facing on your channel though. It's like I just followed that link that you sent.
Oh yeah. Swap over to the Facebook page and see if it posts there.
I do see it there. You posted it 3 hours ago.
Yeah, we're good. We are live. This just takes a while. All right. So, hey, welcome to Revere 311. Going to be interviewing a couple Gunstockers today. So if we want to introduce ourselves real quick, Mr. Dixon, Mr. Ben.
So Ben, if you want to go ahead first.
All right, I'll go. My name is Ben Starnes. I've been gun stocking for I'll turn 21. So yeah, about 5 years now. Revel reenactor with Rivera and Captain Dixon. He is the captain of our unit. Go ahead, Dixon.
So yeah, I'm Andrew Dixon. I'm captain of the Lincoln County Militia. We're a reenacting group out of North Carolina. We've done stuff from New Jersey to Georgia to go for events, and especially good with the 250s spooling up here. Been stocking guns now with Mr. Starnes here for about 2 years now. He's definitely got more time and allotment into it than I do right now because I'm planning a few major life events, and but yeah, I've been enough time to tinker with them and studying the American Longrifle for a few years now, and then I've been reenacting for about 11 years now.
I guess we can start there. What is a Gunstocker?
Dixon, you want to answer this one?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of different things. It's like there's gunsmiths. Those are going to be the people that are building guns from scratch. They're going to be doing things like making barrels, making locks, and the whole 9 yards, as it were. Then you have a gunstocker, which is going to be more what you're seeing in the back country. Going over through the Cumberland with the Daniel Boone, in places like Bethabara, North Carolina. So what they're going to be doing is they're ordering barrels, they're ordering casks of locks, and they're either they either have their own wood there, or they're even ordering stock blanks from France, Germany, England, wherever they're at respective. And then they're the ones that are doing all the inletting of the barrels, inletting the parts. They're making the mounts, and they're the ones that turn it from a block of wood and a barrel and a lock into a functioning rifle. So they're the ones doing the carving, the stock shaping, all of that type of work.
What's the difference? Is inletting is a different phrase than inlaying, right? Is inlaying for not guns?
So inletting is most of the time it is putting a functioning piece into a piece of wood. So for instance, you inlet the lock, which means that you not only inlay, not only you make all the wood fit around the lock, but there's enough room behind it that stuff actually works. Inletting the barrel, usually it's, there's enough room behind the barrel that, there's a little bit of floating action, even in the 18th century that, that you obviously still see with modern bolt guns. Inlaying is more of a decorative term. So you would inlay wire, or you would inlay a brass escutcheon, or you would inlay is making pretty, inletting is really more of a functional thing.
Okay. And that's something that would be done at like an apprentice level. So you start as a gun stalker and then you move up to the next level would be the gunsmith, or how
No,
does that whole process work?
So it's a gilded system. So you would come in as an apprentice, and it was actually for in the Americas and somewhat in Europe, it was a indentured servant's position. A man would indenture his children unless it was the gunsmith's children themselves that were taking on the trade. But you get an indenture in, and it was usually a kid of about, you see them as young as 7, you see them as old as about 14, 15. And that kid, for his first year of apprenticeship, he's sweeping the shop. He is pumping the bellows, learning how to light the forge. He may be doing some filing on some gun parts. He's doing the servant's work. He's doing the dirty work. Later on in his apprenticeship, he'll be taught how to make tools. After you learn how to pump the bellows, the gunsmith a lot of the times will take a tool out of his toolbox and go, "Here, you'll need this in the future," and walk him through forging the tool. He'll walk him through the process of making gun mounts, walk him through the process of inlaying and carving. He will walk him through the steps of building a gun. And to move into the journeyman position, you build a gun. And most of the time, those guns do not look good. Most of those guns do not exist. We still have 2 or 3 that we can prove was that transition. Then you have a journeyman who can make a gun, and the journeyman can leave the shop. A lot of times they'll leave the shop and go work it for another master and learn from him, or they'll stay in the master's shop. And so from there they will refine the craft. Now they know how to build the gun, but now we learn how to make the gun and make it even prettier. And so now, and then eventually you work up to a masterpiece. That's where we get that term. And this system is pretty much universal for trades through the 18th century. So you will eventually have an apprentice that makes a masterpiece, and then he becomes a master. And the same sort of thing. A lot of the times you'll see masters that will take over their old master's spot in the gunsmith shop, or they'll become the partner, or they'll leave and make their own gunsmith shop. And so a gunstalker is the same thing. And sometimes you'll see in records a gunsmith and a gunstalker, they'll switch back and forth between trades. So a guy named Valentine Beck, who I'm sure that we'll mention again here, I have records of his life in Rowan County, North Carolina. 1 year he is in the census, he is a gun stalker, and the next year he's a gunsmith, and then he's back to a gun stalker. So it's not one of those terms that's used interchangeably, but the gun stalker can move back and forth between, or if a good gunsmith can move back and forth between the trade of a gun stalker and a gunsmith, depending on the need.
Do they bounce between it? So can you be a gunsmith, gun stalker on the side as well as like a farmer? Do we know, or is that generally see that as like a primary job for you?
It's usually the primary job, but we see Beck himself, several other gunsmiths, especially in the South, have small yeoman farms. A lot of them are also storekeepers. And just as a disclaimer, the majority of my study is on the southern United States, or really on North Carolina and South Carolina during the 18th century. So that's where I'm speaking from. But you see those guys. A lot of the times they have yeoman farms. Sometimes they're even sons of plantation owners, and you'll see like on the weekends they'll go and work on the farm. They'll go and work on the farm because a lot of the times they don't have a lot of business going on in the shop. This is a specialty job, so if you just have a few repairs that week, if you're not actively building a gun, you get your work done for the week and you just close the shop up and go work on the farm, and you'll come back next week.
Well, so then you have some people like you mentioned there, Valentine Beck. The first time he comes down from Christian Springs in Pennsylvania down to the Moravian settlement of Bethabara, he just basically gets sent back because there's not enough work to justify his position. So, especially amongst religious communities like that, the Moravians are one of the core of long rifle building in America, especially at the start. They'll get sent back to another community where there is going to be more work for them to ply their trade, so their time is, best used in the most efficient manner.
Why are so I guess I have 2 questions, because you talked about rifles in the American South. Why that geographic region? Why don't we see that many rifle makers in New England or more in the Northeast?
Well, let's be clear about this. The reason that I study that geographic region is because I live there and I reenact there, and my family's been here since 1740. So, you know, I'm trying to look at what my grandfathers were carrying, especially when I'm reenacting. But I mean, let's be clear about this. The American Longrifle starts in Pennsylvania. That's gonna make Kentucky folks mad, but that's where it starts. We don't see a lot in New England just because you don't see a lot of gunsmithing cultures settling there. You'll see gunsmiths, but most of the time they're fixing stuff, or they're making fowlers, they're making shotguns for bird hunting. Really, you see gunsmiths in Pennsylvania. They're huge. Maryland, they're there a little while. They're there a little bit. Virginia, there's a massive gunsmithing or gun making presence there. North Carolina, by the 1770s, there's a pretty decent one. It's not near as big as Virginia and Pennsylvania. And then you see gun making in South Carolina to a smaller degree, about the same size as Maryland. And then you see a few gunsmiths in northern Georgia. And that's really about it. I take that back. There's one other community that's making guns in the 18th century, and there's a small German settlement in Louisiana that is making long rifles. Well, actually, they're making more German rifles in American stock wood in Louisiana. But really, that's about it as far as gun making.
And they generally have a Central Europe German tint to them. Rifles exist. Rifling. Could we do like a quick history on rifling? Does it originate from Germany and then kind of goes from there? Because I know, like, I was reading Provincial Arms or something, and they talked about French rifles in like the 1600s, and I just usually think of the Germans.
Dixon, you want to take this one, or you?
Yeah, if memory serves, yes, rifling does originate in Germany, and it does originate, still in the matchlock wheellock era, before our flintlock era here. But it almost seems to take on like a special set of legs in Germany, especially around Saxony. So they're, and then you look at the people that are coming over into the Americas, into Pennsylvania, Western Virginia, like mine and Ben's family here, far enough back, we are related. So they come into the country in 1710, and then they move down into Southwest Virginia. You come into the Piedmont of North Carolina, it's Scots, Irish, and German, and it's these people that are bringing it over. And you're not going to see as much French in English colonies, of course. And the English do have a little bit of a gun making tradition. All right, well, they have a lot of gun making tradition that's still going on today, but rifle making tradition in the era. But it looks, you'll see some of that around where they settle, like in Eastern Virginia, you see in Rifles Colonial America, it's RCA 119. You look at it and you can definitely tell the more English lines of it than the German guns, but the Germans are the ones that are building the most when they come over here.
And like you said, there is a rifle building tradition in England. We have English rifles that date back to the Tudor period. They're matchlocks, but just to reiterate what he said, the majority of the time where we see English stylistically rifles is places like Williamsburg. I mean, that's probably what's being made there in the James River Valley of Virginia, and that's really about it. Or you can identify a predominant English over German style in the Americas.
When do you see the first cheek rest come up in the long rifles, or I guess rifle? Is that from Germany? Because it's kind of interesting. Like, that's one thing. Yeah.
I mean, you see cheek rests on medieval crossbows.
Ah, okay. That's always wild because, like, I remember, like, I saw those, like, kind of reappear for, like, modern ARs, like the cheek rests, like, 10 years ago. And then I'm like, oh, that's pretty neat. And then looking back through history, because they're not in your military rifles of the 20th century. Or I can't think of it, minus like the Model 1803 from Harper's Ferry in the 19th century. But they predate so far back. So obviously they were something that was seen as really important early on for marksmanship. But it goes all the way back to crossbows.
It does provide a comfortable place. it's not necessary, but it's kind of a stylistic thing, and it's also a lot easier when you start hitting mass production to not have it.
And say, because that is one of the to me, that's one of the hardest things to do when making a gun is the cheek piece. I cuss a cheek piece more than I do almost any other part of the gun.
Why is that? Because you get the stock blank and then you start filing with a wood file. Do you draw it out? You draw it out, and then you have to kind of guesstimate.
No, well, you guesstimate about you know about where it's going to be, but it's a matter of getting all the way around it, relieving enough wood so it looks not predominant enough, but it doesn't look too big. You need to have it positioned, just so on the stock so it fits the shooter, or so it looks stylistically correct. And it's just, they're a pain in the butt to make, at least for me. Now I know some people who can, that's the easiest part of the gun. They'll draw it out freehand and then take a saw and a chisel and they'll pop out a cheek piece, or a very, very good cheek piece, in a matter of an hour or 2 hours. So, I mean,
if someone showed up, could you have the rifle stock sized for you? Say, like, I show up, like, hey, will you make me a rifle? Will you take the dimensions of, like, where my natural point of, aim would be, where I would rest my face? Do we know if they do that? Because we know they make particular pieces, right?
Yeah, I mean, you see it a lot in Fowlers as well. I mean, any kind of custom gun, and outside of, like, hey, walking into the shop going, hey, I just need a plain gun, or a trade gun, something like that that's going to be mass produced. If you're having something custom built for you, you're going to have it custom made for you. So you're going to see things like cast off going, okay, well, does there need to be, what looks like a little bit of a, a left to right bend in the net, or in the wrist of the stock, so the sights align perfectly. What's your length of pull? So, like, I've shouldered one today from a buddy of mine. His arms must be much longer than mine, because I'm like, I feel like I've got my arm stretched all the way out trying to reach the trigger. So yeah, you're going to want to take that into account to make something, because at the end of the day, it's going to be something that you're, number one, you're spending a lot of money on as far as rifles go in the 18th century. And, you're still paying for that custom work. So yeah, you're going to want it to fit you in the end.
Yeah. These guys aren't just going into the shop one day and making a rifle. Pretty much all these guns, and I hate using the absolute of all of these guns, but I would say the vast majority of these rifles, especially, are made for somebody. It's not the gunsmith, unless he's making it for himself, going in, I just want to build this rifle today, or I just want to build this rifle for the next month or so. No, there's a guy coming into the shop, and the cost of a rifle at the time is about 3 months' wages for a yeoman farmer. These are not cheap tools. So the guy's coming into the shop, so he's going to make it fit that customer, because that's what the guy's paying for.
And I mean, even nowadays, to kind of give a, how much money that is, you talk to some of these guys that are, that are absolute master smiths that we work with, and, we've had that wonderful blessing to be able to work with, their baseline rifle with, not a lot of carving or no carving at all, you're paying for the hand of a master. They start about $5,000. So to kind of put that into perspective, and that's probably still a little cheaper than it would have been, relatively speaking, in the 18th century. But, that kind of gives you a taste of how much money you're paying for a custom built flintlock.
It's probably why the average person would just buy a smoothbore Fowler hunting piece, trade gun, something like that. Because the rifle, more along, is it mostly for the what do you call them, the long hunters? My brain's a little fried today. The ones that go on the long range hunts, they go over into the mountains to get hides.
You see that? We have come up with a theory that a lot of people in the living history community don't like, but I have researched it for years, and this is the thing that I'm finding. You definitely see rifles there in certain circumstances. You see rifles being used predominantly as tools. You see it in the long hunting capacity, but that's not their primary, that's not the primary point of owning a rifle for the majority of people. And even in long hunting circles, you have guys carrying smoothbores. Like Daniel Boone carried a musket on more than one long hunt, and like a long land. But the majority of the time where you see rifles is it's people with money. There's a lot of work that goes into making an American rifle. So these things, though they are tools, and I'm not downgrading that at all, and it does improve accuracy. The majority of the times that you're not shooting 200-300 yards. There are definitely points where you do, in historical points where that happens, but the majority of the times you're shooting within 100 yards. Where with a smoothbore, that's perfectly fine. These things are status symbols. For the majority of people, these guns are status symbols.
And like I've discussed before, and in living history stuff is, in our modern era, you might show off your new wealth by getting like the newest, best iPhone, or get a new car, new suit of clothes. You don't have a lot of that technology to build, to show off your wealth and status in the 18th century. So it might be, hey, yeah, I'm going to get a new suit of clothes, or some new fine china. We're seeing that as a way to show off. And it might be, hey, I'm going to get a new rifle, and I'm going to get a bunch of, I'm going to get it carved, and there's going to be inlay in it. That it's going to be one of those things that you show off, and it's also going to be one of those things that's going to get a lot of use. So it does kind of turn into buy once, cry once. If you're doing something that's like, okay, I'm in a position I need and want a rifle, you're going to want to get the nicest thing you can afford, because, like I said, buy once, cry once there.
Awesome. Well, we have about 7 people watching. So again, now that we have some more people watching, this is Andrew and Ben. They're Gunstockers. If you recognize them, they were on a couple videos last year, and we're doing like a live stream. So if you have any questions, these are the guys to ask about the American Longrifle, specifically North Carolina. So feel free and drop a comment. B Husky says hello from Alaska. Hey, B Husky, I'm also in Alaska. So I don't even know if you're still here anymore, but yeah. Ben and Andy, if you want to do just another quick introduction with these people that we have showing up for the live stream, that'd be great. Just kind of catch them up. I know we're in a good, we were running smooth, but
sure.
All good. Go ahead, Dix.
All right. So yeah, just for anybody joining in, I'm Andrew Dixon. I've been reenacting, doing living history for about 11 years now. Done Civil War, American Revolution, World War II, a few other things here and there. Been working with Ben here and some, a few master gunsmiths, one of them being like Jim Chambers. So if anybody's looking to get to start, definitely look Jim Chambers flintlock kits, best in the business there, and phenomenal locks. But yeah, so I've been working with Ben here. We work with Jim Chambers, guys like Ian Pratt, Alan Martin. We work with a bunch of masters. So I've been doing this for about 2 years now, working with all of these guys.
My name is Ben Starnes. Been making guns for about 4 years now, 4 or 5. I'll bounce back and forth between that number. But started because I needed a gun for Revolutionary War reenacting. I had less Civil War reenacting for my own personal reasons. And when I started Rev War, I was a 16-year-old kid. Actually, I started when I was I was a 15-year-old kid that just that was getting his driver's license, but I couldn't afford to buy $1,000 Pedersoli gun. So there was the Pecatonica was running a sale on rifle kits, and I suckered my family into buying me one for Christmas, and it lit me on fire. So I have been building and studying the American long rifles in the South, especially in North Carolina, for about 4 or 5 years now.
I guess let's start with that. So what is the American long rifle? What makes it unique, and what makes it uniquely American?
So you have a lot of names that are being thrown around. You have the Pennsylvania long rifle, and you have the Kentucky long rifle, and you have us saying the North Carolina or the American long rifle. If you want to go where the long rifle started, Pennsylvania. However, that's not a historical term at all. That term pops up in the 70s because they want to snub the Kentuckians. And no, it's the Pennsylvania long rifle because that's where it started. The Kentucky long rifle actually is a historical term. You see it pop up in about the 1820s. from a Pennsylvania gunsmith talking about making guns to go into Kentucky. That's why you have the name of the Kentucky long rifle. So that name's been used a lot in history. And if you're talking about guns made past, say, 1825, I don't have a problem with using that personally. And, North Carolina long rifle, we're using that because we're studying guns made in North Carolina. But I think the American long rifle is, at least today, is the correct term, because these guns are uniquely American, and they're not refined to Pennsylvania or to Kentucky or to Virginia or to North Carolina. These guns are used up and down the colonies, well, really starting in Pennsylvania, moving south, and then moving west, and they're used. That's where they're being made. These things are American, because you in fact have German long rifles that are, dating from the 1740s. They have 45-inch barrels and humongous bores that are, I say humongous, about 62 up, and they're stalking rifles. So there needs to be a delineation between something like a German or an English stalking rifle and an American long rifle. Anything to add, Dixon?
Well, I was going to say that, and like you said, this kind of became a ubiquitous thing throughout the colonies. Seeing this now as like, okay, this is now the kind of the symbol of America. So, even if you look, I see a friend of mine popped in the chat there. So, if you look, like I said, looking across the country, you see this as one of the first symbols, as these individual schools, these county schools in Pennsylvania and North Carolina and all these, they kind of branch out and they further develop and they further expand, and it truly becomes an American thing, to the point of it kind of becomes part of the American mythos. I mean, even today, you yourself there, Revere, what is every Marine first and foremost?
It's a rifleman.
Yeah, so that still, even to this day, plays into the American mythos.
Yeah, it was actually the first organized units that were stood up as well, right? The 10 companies of riflemen to join the Continental Army.
As a matter of fact, we're looking at the 250th anniversary of that now, with the anniversary of the Beeline March from Virginia to the outskirts of Boston.
We should actually talk about. You want to talk about that? Well, we have a question here. Hey, Ben and Andrew, quick question for y'all. What would an average North Carolina long rifle look like? Inlay, average length, etc. How can you identify?
All right, Hunter, you've seen us in person and you haven't asked this question, but yeah, we'll go ahead and answer it. Ben, you want to take lead?
Okay, so number one, when if you're talking about, because we have maybe two that exist pre-1770. We have three that exist during the 1770s in North Carolina. So saying an average is, I really don't know. From what the gun that I based my last two long rifles on is, well, I got a picture of it here somewhere. Oh, here we go. This one, well, picture's not that great. By Valentine Beck. If you have long rifles of colonial America, it is gun number 42. So you'll hear us refer to RCA 42. You see calibers ranging, I've seen from that rifle's a 50 to, I have seen records as big as 80, but that was a wall gun. So a good number is anywhere from about 50 to 62. You see that a lot. You see Daniel Boone's rifle, which was made in North Carolina. It was a 66. It was throwing a 1 ounce ball.
And I'll jump in with the stuff I've been going through lately. I've been trying to track down some more archaeological evidence. One of the ones I found kind of cool was evidence. It was a couple of archaeological digs performed down at Williamston Plantation, which is where we do down near Brattonsville, South Carolina. About a third of the found musket balls that they can prove, or rifle balls they can prove are historical, are actually below 45 caliber. So, you're seeing anything from 36 to 80. So, a lot of the stuff like Ben says there in North Carolina is, in that mid to upper 50s, but you're still seeing a sizable minority of, 35, 36 to 45 caliber guns as well, especially as the game's getting smaller that you're hunting. by 1760s, 1770s, you're not hunting buffalo west of the or east of the Appalachians. You're not hunting nearly as many elk, stuff like that. So you don't really need a 60, 70 plus caliber rifle.
As far as length of barrel, that could vary. We have records of rifles being made in North Carolina as early as the 1750s. If for what I have done, I go back to the Pennsylvanians, because if you look at other things like furniture or pottery that's made by specifically the Moravians, you really can't tell the difference, at least until later, about what's being made in Pennsylvania and what's being made in North Carolina. So, I go back to the Moravian sources. So something like the Edward Marshall rifle that shows a 38-inch barrel. That rifle, it's debated when it's built. I'm of the opinion it was built in the early 1760s, or some people say it's built as early as 1750s, and some people say it was built as late as the 1770s. So that has a 38-inch German-made barrel, but you have that Valentine Beck gun, which I think we've dated to about 1765 to 1770. That gun has a 42-inch barrel. The description of Ticklicker has it as a 45 to 46-inch barrel. So barrel length, I think a good number to stay at is about 40, 41. Stylistically, I'm going to stick with something that looks like a Christian Spring style gun. The records record Beck and another gunsmith, Andreas Betts, taking their gunstock blanks from Christian Springs and bringing them down here to start. So I'm going to say stick with a Christian Springs style gun, and German mounts, heavy German influence, at least early. Later on, it's kind of hard to tell because there were a lot of English settling in and around Salem, and definitely in Salisbury, where we see a lot of gunsmiths. People like Thomas Simpson, his guns, there's some later guns of his that actually survive. And they're long, big caliber guns, but they look, the stepped rifts of the German guns are gone. German locks are still there. German style furniture is still there, but you have a lot more development of an English style stock, and in my opinion, that's to suit the people he's selling it to, because a lot of times the Germans don't want to, the English don't want to buy a German looking gun, so the gunsmiths will adapt. And you even see that in Christian Springs too. Anything to add?
And then to add on top of that, you do have the wagon road coming down, that's going to come down from places like Lancaster, York, and so you're going to see, rifles not necessarily made here. So, if you're saying the average North Carolina long rifle, the ones made here, yeah, I would definitely go with Ben. It's like probably going to be more taken off of stuff like Christian Spring style. So the earlier German guns, the large wide butt plates, very much German style carving. And, you get to the point after a while, you just look at it and, you can tell from 50 yards, oh, that's a German gun. But, the other stuff coming down here, especially around the time of the Revolution, you're looking Lancaster guns, which start to get a little thinner, a little smaller as far as like the width of the buttstock, and they get long, they look very long and thin. And I think they're absolutely beautiful guns. I'm working on kind of an early transitional from Christian Springs to Lancaster style gun myself in the basement when I have some time. But so really pick a style and go with it. There's not really a cookie cutter answer, I don't think, other than saying from on the safe side, 50 to 62 caliber, and like Ben said, about a 40 to 42-inch barrel, and Stockton maple
Or walnut, or fruit
Yeah,
wood
I
if you can find it.
Well, I'm gonna go with the law of average, or what the average is here, and say maple's probably gonna be your most certainly your most common that we've seen. And so yeah, that 40 to 42-inch barrel, 50 to 62 caliber, something of a German style, a more heavily German influenced style. So yeah, that would be what I would go with there. As far as inlays, that's going to be how much money you got. So you'll see more carving than inlay in the German stuff that I've seen until you start hitting like wire work, and then you'll see stuff like hunter stars, thumb pieces, stuff like that.
And say that where you see a lot of inlays and stuff is really later than our period. Like there are some guns that look like you have to look for the wood between the silver. Especially later Jamestown style rifles in North Carolina. But yeah, that's
hopefully that, Hunter, if that answered your question, or if you have any more, please let us know. Here's a question I have. Why a lot of brass parts for the long rifle? You don't really see that much in military guns. You do. It's kind of 50-50 between iron and brass mountings. But why brass for more civilian? Or do you see iron mountings or iron pieces for long rifles?
You just started a debate. Go ahead.
So
well, my next one's barrel bands. Why no barrel bands on long rifles?
Oh no, we're not going there.
We'll get there in a minute. As far as brass, it's something that's you can get it plentifully, you can cast it easily, as opposed to having to forge iron mounts. The other thing is, if I've got wrought iron, okay, I have a lot of other things I can do than make a butt plate or make a mount. If I'm making hinges, making nails, making other things, other materials and other things that you need, making barrels, locks, all this stuff. So if you have a limited supply of wrought iron, okay, we're using it for other stuff. So the brass, like I said, is plentiful. It's easy to cast, stuff like that. Now, that being said, there are some very famous iron mounted guns, one of which I tend to harp on a lot. Let me actually pull up the description here. I've got it saved on my phone somewhere. Oh, where's Album of Flintlocks? It's from January 16th of 1776. I can't seem to find it right now, but it talks about a small bore rifle that was stolen. It was persimmon stocked, had a pistol lock, iron mounted. The patch box lid was off. So, you do definitely see accounts of iron mounts. The Holston gun is also an iron mounted gun. So you definitely see it there. It's a harder process to make. Yeah, they exist. It's a harder process to make them. Oh, that's gonna bug me.
But so then there's the theory that you'll see them referred to some in history or in historical documents as black rifles. That these rifles are completely black, so the barrel's probably dark blue or browned, dark stained stock, iron mounts. These guns are not made to be flashy and shiny. There's the theory that these guns, if there is such thing as a purely utilitarian gun, that's what these guns were, and they were used up. You have iron furnaces in places like North Carolina and in Virginia and in Pennsylvania. So it wouldn't be inconceivable for some of these guns to be built and to be used. But say historically, you just don't see them. I think that reference is the earliest we have to an iron-mounted gun in the American-made iron-mounted rifle.
Yeah, I've got it pulled up here.
You got it?
Yeah. It's January the 12th, 1776. It's from the Williamsburg Gazette. It says, on the 6th of this instant was stolen from a soldier in my company a rifle gun, her stock made of persimmon tree, iron mounted, has a pistol lock, the box lid lost, and her bore very small. Anyone producing said gun to me at this place shall have $2 reward, no questions asked. William Campbell.
Huh. So is that an actual pistol lock, or are they just calling a smaller lock a pistol lock?
I mean, a smaller lock is going to be a pistol lock. Luke, real quick, rules on live stream. I don't remember. I can show a lock just as long as it's not in a gun, right?
I would just not.
Okay. So I've got one here. It's a fidget toy. So a pistol lock or a small rifle lock can really be used interchangeably. So like Jim Chambers, will go back to their locks because they're ones we use 99.99% of the time. They have a Queen Anne's pistol lock, and then they have a small, what they call their Golden Age rifle lock. There's about a half-inch length difference. They're about the same height. So, a pistol lock can be just a very small rifle lock. It's not going to be one of the big German locks, or or especially something like you're used to with the larger French musket locks.
Okay. Yeah, it's just that's interesting because I've seen that kind of reference before for like they call it like a dragoon lock. They're like, we're going to remake this gun with a dragoon lock, which is a smaller lock. So I was wondering how they scale up. Turkey Creek 1823, just hop on. Hope you didn't miss too much. You didn't miss much at all. If you want to ask questions, Turkey Creek, I got two of some friends of mine, two Gunstockers on talking about the American long rifle. Any questions about North Carolina long rifles or just long rifles in general, throw them out. And currently talking about why don't rifles have bands? Why don't we have why are there no barrel bands?
Okay, so you see, now what's funny is there actually is one example I'm thinking of off the top of my head from the 18th century that does have bands. And what it looks like is somebody took a Dutch carbine barrel.
Oh, that one. That's ugly. My God.
Yeah, but it's the one that Eric showed us. They look like they took a Dutch musket carbine barrel and rifled the thing and needed a stock, so they stocked it in white pine and painted it with red ochre.
It is hideous.
It's an abomination. I want to build it one of these days just to have it, just to make people twitch.
They stocked it in pine?
White pine. It's stocked in white pine.
Oh wow! Have you ever seen another piece stocked in pine?
Nope. So back to the pins versus bands. First thing, pins are a whole lot easier to make, and especially making your barrel lugs. You're making those with a file, and then you're making them out of brass. So they're a lot easier to make as opposed to having to now, okay, again, we have to use more of that wrought iron to forge these bands. And then it's like, okay, you have to make the gun. Now each gun's going to be a little bit different. This isn't going to be stuff built on an assembly line like a military gun's going to be, or effectively built on an assembly line through the guild system. So you have to make new bands with each one. You can't have a bin of bands laying here and maybe tweak them a little bit. So it's going to be a lot easier just to make the same little barrel lugs under it and then drill a pinhole through it. So you're not having to make a custom set of bands each time. And especially if somebody loses one of those bands or breaks one of those bands, it's a whole lot easier to replace the pin than it would be to replace a band.
Is that something you'd have an apprentice do? Like you would just make pins? Like this is what you're gonna be doing for today?
Pretty much. They had something that looked a lot like a draw knife, and you see some of them actually pinned with brass, but majority are iron. And you would just have a piece of wrought iron there that they would just take and shave off a piece big enough to make a pin with, and then they'd either file or forge it round, or just like cold forge it round, and that's how the pins were made. And say they didn't just go to the store. They didn't do like we do and just go to the store and buy some piano wire. No, you had to make that. And I'm going to jump in because this is something you see later with American long rifles. You see pins. You don't see them disappear completely. You see them kind of fade into the background. You see keys or wedges. You see those become the major way to hold things in, because then you can take the barrel out easier and clean under and everything like that. In fact, the first Brown Besses had keys, like pattern number 1 had barrel keys, and later it turned in but there's a lot of iron. How many pins can you make with that out of that one barrel key? So you'll see them pop up. You see them in the British 1776 rifle. You see them on British Fowlers a lot, but you really don't see them on American guns until later.
Okay. Well, there's the American long rifle. Are there American short rifles? Because you mentioned that the Germans had the long rifles. I know the Germans had the short rifles. Do we have examples of shorter rifles here in America during the 18th century?
Dixon, you want this one? Or you want me to?
I'm about to say the shortest thing off the top of my head is going to be something like the Marshall rifle, that's got about a 38-inch barrel, which, for the era is a fairly short rifle, especially when you're talking to the range of 40, 45-inch barrels plus. Part of it also, don't quote this as gospel because I don't remember where I'm pulling this from, Part of it also seems to have to do with the quality of powder made here in the colonies versus stuff made over on the continent. So you need that longer barrel to have the efficient use of said powder. And then other things, like something we see modern days, it doesn't necessarily make a rifle more mechanically accurate, but to have a longer sight radius also does help in the long run of things.
I say that the Germans have a long rifle, and they do have. There's a reason they're called stalking rifles, because that's the majority of the hunting that's being done over here is stalking. You are tracking these animals, and or you're waiting. You're finding a path where they cross often, and you're waiting and ambushing these deer, elk, bison, whatever it may be, a lot like we do today. However, over in Germany, the majority of the hunting's being done on horses. So you have rifles over there that have 15-inch barrels because they're hunting off of horses, and it's a lot easier to swing a carbine length barrel gun like what we traditionally would call a Jaeger across a horse's head without hitting it in the head, or across a horse's back without hitting in the head, shooting at a moving deer, or even shooting at a deer standing still. So the majority of the rifles being made in Germany and the first rifles being made here have shorter barrels, ranging from about 31 to a 38-inch barrel. Like I said, you see smaller, especially in Germany. You really don't see smaller over here, but that's what's happening.
Okay, so what are some challenges you face as a gun stalker? Like, you talked a little bit about the cheek rest being kind of hard to make. For you, what is the hardest piece that you've had? The hardest piece that you've had to make or put together, I guess.
Well, the hardest thing to deal with as a gun stalker is the United States Postal Service.
Well, you can thank Benjamin Franklin for that. So,
I mean, hardest piece I've had to make or had to do. I don't like doing patch boxes. You see patch boxes on the majority of rifles. I hate doing patch boxes because I have to relearn it every time because everyone's different. And this is a lot of this is me. This is me. I make maybe 2 rifles a year, and I forget in between rifles what I'm doing. Like this last rifle I made, I bored the bolt. I made the box perfectly smooth before I cut the dovetails for the sliding patch box. That may be foreign to a lot of people, but yeah, it just it's a lot of it's me forgetting. The coolest part to make, in my opinion, is the butt plate. I've made my own butt plates for the last for 2 rifles. I love making my butt plates. I love making my own parts. Making a nose cap sucks, but I mean, it is something that I need to learn and something that I'm getting better at. What about you, Dixon? What's the part you hate the most?
The one thing I've come to loathe right now, and I'm probably going to build 1 or 2 more guns with them, and that is doing the inletting on a hook breech. So when we talked about the barrel keys, how that allows the barrel to lift out so easily is the standing breech, or the face of the breech, is actually on the gun, and then there's a hook that actually hooks through it, something like that, and then it allows you to lift the barrel out once you knock those keys out. And trying to file that to fit, and then to inlet the 2 pieces, solder together, it is a right pain in the butt.
Jeff and Leslie, Wildlife and Nature Photography. Good to see you, man. Says, I don't like doing patch boxes either. I'm also not fond of entry thimbles. What's it?
Yeah, they're not fun either.
That's the thimble for the ramrod.
Yeah, so you have the 2 front ones, and then there's the one with the little tab on the back of it. That's the entry thimble. Yeah, I've made them before. I don't like making them, and for me, it's a lot easier. I'll pull the Gunstocker thing. It's a lot easier and a lot cheaper for me to order a lot of times from Jim Chambers. Just order my parts from him and stock it. But inletting, it's a pain in the butt because you have to get everything perfectly right so the thing doesn't rock, and then you have to carve around it so the wood matches up perfectly. It's a pain, but it like I said, it's a pain, but you have to learn how to do it if you're going to make your guns look good.
The patch boxes, those are pretty early, right? By the middle, when do they kind of go out of fashion? because you have patch boxes for individual wads of patch, or this is something I went over when I was shooting that trade gun I recently got, is that there's wads. You're supposed to shoot powder ball wad. Patch box is for shooting patches, right? Or am I getting this confused?
Patch boxes are just it's a little box on the rifle. It's kind of like sticking M&Ms in the hole in a buttstock on an M16.
Okay.
You know, it's a little slot there that you can put about anywhere you want, or put anything you want. So I actually have a powder measure, another YouTube channel, Cap and Ball. I think he's Hungarian. He makes reproductions. They're a little brass powder measure that's adjustable, that was found in a stock of a Austrian Jaeger, I think made in like the 1760s. You see spare flints. You see, maybe a small tool stuck in there. It's like like one of my modern rifles. I have the front sight tool stuck in the pistol grip. So it's
And you
just
see
whatever you want
patches
to do.
too.
Yeah, but so you do see patches too, but it's just mainly whatever you want to put in there.
And patch
That's interesting.
boxes are one. Sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, no,
patch
go ahead.
boxes are one of those things that, as far as dating them, you read a lot of stuff on like the Long Rifle forum. I haven't seen this lately, but you'll see something that the patch box is uniquely American. No, the brass patch box is uniquely American. You see like I said, you see patch boxes on medieval crossbows, and more likely what that's holding is it started out as a toolbox, and then when you need shooting patches for rifles, that just hey, it's there, so it becomes the patch box. But when it goes out of style, the last gun I can think of that had it was the 1874 Sharps. They had a patch box.
Oh yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then you see some of the a little bit later than our era, because our era and interest of flintlocks usually stops about 1783, so about the end of the American Revolution. But you look a little bit later, you see some rifles that don't have patch box, but they just have like a grease hole in them so that you can put something in there to actually grease the patches before you put them down the bore. So there's other stuff there that continues on well into the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff and Leslie pointed out I made one patch box where I put threaded studs in there, 8x32, where the jag and worm could screw into so they wouldn't rattle around. So that's interesting. I don't know why my brain.
That's a good idea. I'm going to do that now.
Yeah, that one's going in the notebook now.
Yep, thanks.
You see, it comes all the way back for the M16A4s. You have the oiler box. I don't even know what they call it in your buttstock, where you can put your cleaning tools and stuff in that. So it kind of goes away, then it comes back. No, the M1 Grand has it. The M14 has it.
Lee Enfields they have a butt trap.
Lee Enfields have it. Wow, look at that. It's just they don't have the little brass on the side now, so they don't stand out quite as much as they used to.
Yep.
So speaking of ball and wad, I don't know if you've taken the time to watch my comment section when I was shooting with the patch and ball. What we've talked a little bit about this. What is a wad specifically? So it's like a sponge material. I'm very new to basically
wadding is just going to be anything to keep the necessary parts to fire a muzzleloader in place. So, like if you look at military cartridges, because I know you do a lot of stuff with like French military muskets, paper cartridge, you pour the powder down. Now that paper has become your wadding. That's going to keep the ball, the powder, everything in place. So if you're shooting shot, you want to put wadding down, and then your shot, and then more, possibly more wadding on top. I don't shoot a lot of smoothbore with shot, but so don't take what I say necessarily as gospel. But yeah, it's mainly the stuff to keep everything in its area. So if you dump, if I can speak English, if you dump the front of the gun over, everything doesn't go and roll out the end. So that's going to be your wadding, and it's going to help keep your shot together. Now, what we're going to be using with rifles is going to be patching. That's going to be shooting patch ball. We're not really going to be using wadding.
Okay. So historically, patching was most of the time it was cloth. You see references to like buckskin. I mean, you see thicker stuff used as patches. I'm not going to make the silk joke. I'm not going to make the silk joke.
Oh, come on, use a silk patch. It gives you an extra 50 yards.
Yeah, that's the biggest crock of horse crap I've ever heard. In any case,
Love
shooting
the
is
movie. I hate that line.
yeah, shooting smoothbore for shot, because that's the reason I own a smoothbore. If I'm going to shoot a solid ball, I'm going to shoot a rifle, but I own 2 smoothbores I squirrel hunt with them. So what I do historically, what's going to be used is a lot of the time is tow, which is the byproduct of making linen. You see wasp nests used historically. A lot of the time for like overshot one, I use dried leaves. It can be anything. Seriously, it's just to keep your shot in place. And sometimes you got to play with the wadding to keep especially shooting shot, to keep your pattern right. But that's my 2 cents on it, at least.
Why not paper cartridges for military or for, I guess, long rifles? Do we see them at all? I'm sure there's always like an exception to the norm, right?
Yeah,
I guess.
there's an exception to the rule. Part of it is going to be if it's extra time and extra resources. If I'm just going hunting, I don't need a box full of 20 something cartridges if I'm going to be taking a couple shots in a day. So that's extra time, resources that's used there. When I have a powder measure hanging off my bag and a horn, I'm dumping into the powder measure down the bore of the gun. That gives me my consistency that I need. Now, during the war, during the revolution, you do see sometimes cartridges issued, and they're really close to what we shoot as reenactors. There's no ball in them because each of these rifles is a custom piece. So it's like, okay, well, I now have a bag full of 60 grain charges, and now I have to go make the ball this size to the bore of my gun because me and Ben are a prime example of this. When we go out in the field, or last weekend or this weekend, we were out, 3 of us out there. We each had rifles. He was carrying a 62, I was carrying a 50, and our other guy was carrying a 36. So having standardized powder charges helps a little bit, as far as the issuance side, especially if you're in a military encampment or moving with the military, like you see Virginia riflemen with Lafayette in the 1781 Virginia campaign that leads to Yorktown. But ultimately, you're not going to have some guy in an arsenal somewhere, pouring, oh, well, we need this many 36 caliber and this many 38 caliber because, like I said earlier, I was looking through bore sizes that have been dug at a historic site that's about an hour from, or about 45 minutes from me. You see 36, 38, 40, 42, 41, all the way up into 60, 60, what was it, 62, and I think all the way up to 69 caliber smoothbore for like a Bess. So you can't have that many individual types, and especially, if you're hand forging a barrel, it might not be a true 50, it might be a 49 and a half. So you're going to have a ball mold swage that's going to be swaged and it's going to be made to your gun. So you need to pour your own ball.
Now you do see paper cartridges in a military context on the British side of the Revolution. So you see them with the German Jaegers. What they're doing is they're issuing the paper and the stuff to make their own cartridges, and they're still pouring their own ball, but they're making their own cartridges, and each of these rifles has a specific powder charge that it likes. So they're making their own cartridges with their own powder charges, and sometimes they're priming from their horns, sometimes they're priming from the cartridges. It depends on who's shooting. You see the same thing when the British started issuing the 1776 rifles. I'm not so versed on the Ferguson. I think it was all loaded from the horn. But, there is precedent for rifles using paper cartridges, just not in an American context, or at least using fully contained paper cartridges in an American context.
So the rifles that the Jaegers used, were those more standardized in size and caliber? They seem to be standardized in how they look.
At the start of the war, no.
No, they're
because
using.
the first Jaegers being brought over. I mean, Jaeger is quite literally just a hunter.
Yeah.
They are people that are working on these large estates, things like that, and they're also acting as the light infantry for these German principalities. So some of them have their own guns. So you do see rifles up to like 80 caliber, and then you do see things that are become of a pattern. Museum in Yorktown has a wonderful original Ansbach Jaeger rifle. So you do see military issue patterns, and especially they start to displace those personal guns the further it goes along. So by the end of that, yeah, you're going to start to have some more standardization, but that changes depending on when you're talking.
And where you're talking.
Because American riflemen are unique in that you bring your rifle with you. You're a volunteer into a rifle company. It's not like you join a Continental Line regiment. You don't have a musket. Here's a musket. In general, the riflemen bring their own gun. They have their own experience. They're put into a command, and then they're sent off to war. At least
in everywhere but North Carolina.
Everywhere but North Carolina, they issued rifles in North Carolina.
No, you brought your own rifle, but you weren't put into a rifle unit.
Oh, okay.
Because if you look through history, North Carolina tends to get the short end of the stick a lot, and they didn't want that to happen again. So they kept their riflemen with their line units, and they were acting as scouts. They were acting as riflemen. They were acting as scouts. When a fight would break out, sometimes they would form an ad hoc rifle company, and they would take to the trees or take behind a stone wall and pick off targets. But you don't see North Carolinians forming. You don't see them sending riflemen up when the Virginians do. Now you see specific rifle regiments with the Virginians, Pennsylvanians, and either New Jersey or Maryland. It may be both.
Maryland.
In Maryland, that's what I thought. So,
Jeff has a question. Did they use paper cartridges on the Ferguson rifles? I
don't know. That's not my area.
That's the thing is, I don't remember. I know you can use paper cartridges with it, and like I've seen them shot at NPS demo or National Park Service demos. They make you have to use a paper cartridge for that, but I don't know enough on the Ferguson rifle right now, and I need to read more up on it myself because I want to build one of these days. But yeah, as it stands, we don't really know on that one.
Get to Whit Bailey's book, British Flintlock Rifles of the Americas. Get that one. It'll tell you.
Yeah, and I see Turkey Creek 1823 here in the civilian context paper on the frontier is somewhat rare. So yeah, that was kind of what I was hitting on there of the the more resources that you don't have to use that you can allocate to other more important tasks, because if you use a piece of paper for a musket cartridge or a rifle cartridge, you've used it for a rifle cartridge, you're going to tear it, dump it, shove it down the barrel, or drop it on the ground, so that you have now wasted that paper for use of when you don't have a lot. It's not a military it's not a military machine where you can acquire more of these things, or you're just issued these paper cartridges.
Josh Shop hopefully will bring his Ferguson rifle to Camden this year. So November of 2025, Camden reenactment.
I'm not going to say who it was, but I have seen somebody walk into camp wearing dual tube nods, carrying a Ferguson with a PEC hose clamped to the side of it.
Really nice. Piece
that
of
was a fun
night vision goggles too, right?
That was the event we met you, wasn't it?
Yes, that was the event we met him.
Yeah, Camden reenactment is awesome. You should definitely go to it. It's a fun time. I have a blast. Maybe too much fun.
I think we're gonna do. We should be wearing red this year.
Oh, really? You're doing militia?
No, 15th.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 15th lights may be coming down. So we, in addition to our militia kit, we portray members of the 15th Regiment of Foot Light Company. So that's kind of where our the wanting to build the 76 rifles took legs, and then now we built a kit around it just for funsies.
Yeah.
So the pattern 76 rifle. That's a great question. So the pattern 76 rifle. People kind of talk about the Ferguson rifle more than the pattern 76. Is the pattern 76 given to who's that issued to? Is it issued to individuals and the light
So
companies?
the 76, it basically starts as a a response to what's effectively propaganda from the American long rifle. So I've made a couple of posts before about it. The long rifle, a lot of times its effect on the enemy was more psychological than physical. You have British officers writing, it's like, I fear, I need to get my affairs in order because I have fear that I may be failed by one of these American riflemen, or the famous line of like these dreaded widowmakers with their twisted barrel guns. So you start to see a lot of that. So that's why you see the Jaegers brought over to deal with the pesky American riflemen, and you see. I'm going to go as far as to say what I would call the first designated marksman rifle in the pattern 1776 rifle. So you see them brought over, and they're issued out. I think it's either 2 or 3 per light infantry company. They're supposed to
At
be
the
given
start,
at the start, to the best shots in the company. You see groups like the 16th Light Dragoons ending up with a bunch. Provincial units like the Queen's Rangers, they end up with a good many, but they're meant to be issued out to the best marksmen usually in a light infantry company or a light infantry context. So that's why I'm calling it the first designated marksman's rifle.
and then you have in the Southern campaign, you have the pattern regiment, you have the 33rd that draws 50 of them. There was only 1,000 made, and they're operating as lights. They're operating as a light battalion in the Southern campaign, and you see the first Foot Guards have some at Guilford. You finding 62 caliber ball at Kings Mountain that are being shot in the opposite direction of the Americans. So it is my assertion that the 76 was on Kings Mountain.
And you have that's backed up with the talking from DePaster in DeWitt Bailey's book, who is the second command who ultimately surrenders at Kings Mountain, that he wants basically half of his men armed with musket and bayonet in the front rank, and then his rear rank to be armed with these rifles, so they can be protected by the bayonets of the muskets and a faster firing gun. But at the time, they're in the rear rank, able to take careful, deliberate aim.
That's so interesting.
And as far as building reproductions, Andrew is working on the English version, or actually, I've got it right now. I need to do some work on it to get back so we can get it done for Princeton this year. That's the hope. And there, to my knowledge, I have built the only German one that's in the reenacting community. There was one fellow several years ago, he has now passed on, that was building a reproduction of the German one that I admittedly is better than mine because I am still a novice at this. That said, I have put a lot of research into this gun, so I have built as close as I can with my ability the German one, the Hanoverian pattern 76. So we're going to have both of them to show off.
Do you want to talk a bit more about how riflemen were employed tactically on the battlefield? It seems
Ooh, sure.
some
I've gone down this rabbit hole.
because they're not normally, from my understanding, they're not normally in front of the lines. They're usually on the flanks, engaging with flanking fire. Not as much.
That changes depending on when and where you are.
So you see how scalp ones.
Yeah, so that starts. Oh, again, I love. There's a quote in here. Let me see if I can find it. It talks. It's from Lafayette's. Let's see. It's somewhere around here. Sorry, it's a quote from Lafayette and his light division. It talks about in 1781. This is kind of where the rifleman ends or rifleman goes in the course of the war. They're going out in ones and twos. It says they're blacking their faces, and the woods are resounding with their war cries and yells. So they're going out to harass sentries. They're going out to do scouting. They're making an absolute nuisance of themselves, and that is where they are at the end of the war. They're acting kind of like lights, doing something like you would see earlier. Almost like an arranging capacity in a much more limited scope. Instead of they're more of a tactical thing than a strategic unit as far as ranging goes. But they're going out, like I said, making an absolute nuisance of themselves with the British, picking off sentries if they see, if they're able to capture people and get information, bringing back prisoners. And on the opposite side of that, it's also noted if they're caught, they are like beaten mercilessly. I'm trying to remember who it is. Has a great paper on it. Is it John Rees?
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
think
think
so.
he's got a wonderful paper on it that compiles all of this stuff and a lot of these firsthand accounts together. But as far as it goes, early in the war, and again, I'll bring back up the 250th of the Beeline March. These guys are going up. They're treated very, with a lot of care. They're very special guys when they're showing up, and they're also, they're showing off on the way up. They're doing trick shooting, stuff like that to make their presence known. And they're put into the line when and where they're needed, but they're also excused from doing stuff like the manual labor jobs. This builds a lot of animosity. You see them interspersed with musket armed men and some early Continental Line units, which is a mess and a half because I think it's actually Muhlenberg
Yep.
does not like them at all. And he basically says, their rifles ought to be taken. They ought to be given muskets like real soldiers, effectively. So if you're trying to use them as a one-on-one with a musket arm infantry, you've got a problem because they're not. So you start to see groups like Morgan's Riflemen and stuff. You start to see what's effectively combined arms doctrine. They're going out, they're skirmishing, they're acting like light infantry. Let's see what we got. Yeah, I see the quote here from Jeff and Leslie, Wildlife and Nature Photography. Yeah, practical limit about 200 yards, can hit about 20% at 300. Yeah, I've taken mine out to 200 on a pie plate, and on man side targets, that's about where I'm good at. You do see shots further than that, but to go back to what I was saying, you see Morgan's Riflemen, they're firing from the trees and they're going out, and if they get jumped, then they can fall back behind musket and bayonet armed infantry to push off, any kind of close assault. So that's really how they end up being best used as in a combined arms doctrine or as light infantry, as you see in Lafayette's division in the Virginia campaign of 81. Sorry if I'm kind of rambling. I'm a little tired.
No, it's all good because they're initially they're the first 10 companies of riflemen are put together in June of 1775. That's going to be 6 from Maryland. No, 6 from Pennsylvania, 2 from Virginia and Maryland. And then that's a independent rifle company.
Battalion, effectively.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a
battalion.
Yeah, 10 companies, right. And they head up north, and that's under Morgan, right?
Yep.
Whatever happens to those guys? So they show up for the siege of Boston. They pick off sentries. They get in some brawls. They upset George Washington
a lot.
That
and
quote.
Then some of them have the and again, probably another lesson you've learned from the military is being first is usually the bad thing. So the guys, so the companies that get there first, they go on America's first offensive action, the invasion of Canada. That doesn't end well for them. Cold, hungry, starving. A lot of them captured. I think Morgan himself actually gets captured in that engagement outside or in Quebec. So you see a lot of that. You see some of them converted back into musket armed troops at the word of people like Muhlenberg. And then you see, especially these early enlistments run out, you see these guys go back home and they now are bringing that experience back to them with the militia, which definitely comes back to help in the Southern campaign of 80 and 81.
And you still see Morgan's Riflemen, especially after Morgan, I don't remember whether he's released or escapes, but you see them as a formidable unit later on, especially at places like Saratoga, because it's Morgan's guys who were, in my opinion, they're effective, or they're responsible for the route. When Simon Fraser gets killed, he's supposedly killed by the Irish immigrant Timothy Murphy, and shot at 300, reportedly 300 yards. Now, there's probably, take that with a grain of salt. There's probably some embellishment there, but you actually see them. To my knowledge, that's the only time they close hand to hand. You see them take a redoubt after Fraser dies and the troops are routed on the field. Later on, especially in the Southern campaign, when he is now General Morgan, he comes down here. You see them at up north. You still see them at places like Monmouth, but down here you see them at cow pens. You see them used effectively at cow pens, and that one they're actually fighting in line, firing volleys. They were the first line. Take that back. They were the second line at cow pens. You see them at Guilford. You'll see them in the race to the dam. They're acting a lot like Lafayette. Go ahead, Dixon.
And I was going to say, but by the time you see them down here in the South at Cowpens, Race to the Dan, Guilford, those guys that, some of them may have been part of some of these early rifle companies, they're now with the militia, and it's like, okay, well, I need picked marksmen, especially like we said, Cowpens, they're that first and second line. That second line's a lot of militia. That first line, those are the guys that, can shoot. So it may be, a flight of fancy here, but I would like to think the majority of those guys in that first line, if not all of them, are rifle armed. And then, like I said, Williamson Plantation in 1780, there's a variation of rifle balls found. So there's a lot of rifle shooting at Captain Huck and his men there. Kings Mountain, it talks about, for the battle, the men with the best rifles on the best horses are the ones sent out ahead of the main body to effectively pin, and they're ultimately the force that defeats Ferguson at the Battle of Kings Mountain. That's about 5 miles from my house. I go down there and walk that trail frequently. So, like I said, these guys fold back into their state's militias, and they pop their heads up much to the chagrin of the British Army and Loyalist militias in the South.
Yeah, I was just reading the initial contract from 1775. So they enlist for a year, which is the problems that Washington has in early war years. After everyone's enlisting for a year or to the end of the calendar year, which makes holding on to experience and veterancy pretty hard. So you probably assume that some of those riflemen probably leave service, come back into service, come and go, or they're captured in Quebec. It's such a Turkey Creek left a comment. The two Virginia companies, the one from the Winchester area was under Morgan, and the one from the Shepherdstown area was under Hugh Stevenson, who was highly respected but died in 76. Did he die up in Canada, Turkey Creek, if we know? Because if they went into
research into him at all.
Sorry?
So I haven't done very much research into that particular gentleman at all.
I'm curious how many, if all those 10 companies went into British Canada and were
No,
taken out.
It was basically the first, I think, 2 or 3 companies that showed up are the ones that went with them.
Okay. Well, if anyone else has any other questions in the live stream, drop them down. We're getting up to like 17 people current, so that's pretty cool. So how do you balance art versus function in the American long rifle or in a long rifle? You want to talk about barn guns versus some of those silver inlaid gold? I don't think, do they inlay gold?
You see
very
it, little. Not common. So, I mean, as far as how do you balance function and art, you make it function first, and then if you have the money, you make it pretty.
It's like a car.
Pretty much.
Exactly. Yeah. You have some rifles that are very ornately decorated that are used a lot. I'm thinking specifically of the Lion and the Lamb gun, probably one of the most ornately carved American rifles, in my opinion, period. Very, very nicely engraved, but if you ever research it, there's pictures on Google. It was cut back for a bayonet, and it has brown Bess ramrod tubes, and it has a cut down. It has actually an extended Bess ramrod. It was pressed in the military service. The RCA 42 that I've shown. It's a very ornately carved gun, but from the people I know who've handled the original, it's a very light gun, and you can pick it up and go, wow, yeah, this is a weapon. This was made to kill something. So American long rifles, like Dixon said, they're functional first, pretty later, but a lot of the times they're very pretty and very functional. And you see things like poor boy guns, they'll pop up later. You have original barn guns, especially in the Lehigh Valley region. You see a few Moravian-made barn guns, which, when we're saying barn guns, they're guns that may not, they may have all the mountings. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're missing an entry tube or entry thimble. Sometimes they're missing a butt plate. Sometimes they're missing a
nose cap.
Nose cap. You'll see those pop up, especially up there in Virginia. A lot of times, or excuse me, in Pennsylvania, a lot of times they're smoothbore guns, but you'll see a rifle every now and then. Contemporarily, a lot of times they're called a shimmel gun, especially by a good friend of ours, Alan Martin. He makes a shimmel and a shimmel deluxe. A shimmel deluxe has a butt plate. Then you have down here, you have them referred to as cracker rifles a lot, which is a rifle that has all the mountings, but it has no engraving, has no carving. It is as plain as plain can get, but it works. Yep. It shoots very accurately.
That's it, and that's the thing. And also, with a rifle like that, you can go back later, and some of these things can be added later, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Like you'll have wooden patch box guns that, you can see the place where the butt plate's cut out for the wooden patch box. There's a piece of brass soldered in it, and the brass box is put on later in life.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a lot of stuff that I won't say even the majority of guns, but you see a few guns that were probably made very plain, and then maybe a year or so down the line, when the guy had more money, he took it back to the gunsmith and goes, okay, I want carving and engraving now, because that can be done later.
So what are they carving and engraving to make them a little bit more fancy or a little bit more unique, I guess?
So
you go ahead.
So one of the most common things you see, especially looking at German guns, they look like scrolls on the buttstock. They're near the near the very end, and then you'll see leaves and stuff off of that. You'll see different types of molding, so there'll be lines carved around it, around the base of the gun, the bottom of the stock, out through the handguard. I think is it Lehigh Valley. There's like a face that gets carved on the underside of the gun. It's just a really odd looking thing.
Yeah, another reason not like a Lehigh rifle.
So one of the other things you see are what are called beaver tails. They're going to be around the lock plate, and I mean it's very simply described. They look like a beaver tail, and the name's pretty self-explanatory. Around the tang of the gun, which is going to be the metal piece that comes off the back of the breech, you'll see things like a shell. So that's going to be the shell of baptism. A lot of times is the reference there. You see one of the ones I've seen pictures of. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's called the musician's rifle. There's a lot of metal engraving. So you see hunting scenes, hogs' heads, arrows.
The reason it's called the musician's rifle is on the butt plate. There's a big there's a German fellow with the big German hunting horn.
So I thought it was on the patch box.
What?
Hang on, I thought it was on the patch box.
That's what I said, didn't it?
You said butt plate.
Oh, I'm sorry, patch box.
Oh, let me find my album.
No,
yeah, because the butt plate. Yeah, the butt plate's got some knot work on it for this rifle. It's absolutely gorgeous if you ever get to see pictures of it. One that I like, again, you'll hear us refer to RCA. Those Rifles of Colonial America by Shumway. Yeah, it's 119. It's got a hunting scene on the side plate. It's got a hog's head on the trigger guard. It looks very cool, and it's brass. It's engraving in the brass.
You'll see with the Moravians, you'll see a lot of odd things. Like I mentioned, the lion and the lamb gun. The reason it's called the lion and the lamb gun is because there's a lion. Well, a person who's never seen a lion but heard of the description, there's that kind of carving on where you usually see the scrolls behind the cheek piece.
It's the stereotypical Moravian lion motif.
Yeah. You have the Griffin rifle made by actually the guy who made the music, not the musician's rifle, the guy who made the lion and the lamb gun. His name's Andreas Albrecht. He's, in my opinion, one of the guys who actually helped start the American rifle. But his apprentice, Christian Orator, has a rifle called the Griffin rifle, which is now held in the Museum of the American Revolution. It has a Griffin that is carved, and then is outlined in silver wire work. Dixon mentioned the shell of baptism is on these things. You have to remember all these guys, and this is one that I feel comfortable saying. All these guys were Christian. So you see a lot of Christian symbolism on these guns. Shell of baptism is pretty common because a lot of these guys were either Moravian, Lutherans. You see a few Roman Catholic, gunsmiths. Actually, I found one. You have a lot of Quakers, so you'll see some Quaker symbols on some guns, especially in North Carolina and a few in Pennsylvania. So you'll see symbolism and that sort of thing all over these guns, but you have to know what you're looking for. They won't just come out and put a cross on their gun. A lot of the times, it'll be something that is seen on historical vestments or historical banners, or just symbols that would have been seen in relation to Christianity at the time.
Yeah, a couple of things to jump in here. Again, from Jeff and Leslie Wildlife here. Said they made a copy of the lion gun. Always thought it was representative of the Lion of Judah. Yeah, that is exactly what we're. Yeah, that's exactly what we're insinuating here. Is it's the Moravian lion motif, but that's where they draw that from, if memory serves well. This also has Tree of Knowledge under the cheek piece. I've got to go back and look at that. That's cool.
Oh, pictures of it right. Picture of it is right here. When we get done, I'm going to look at it.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Stickman 87. I don't really want to take away. You guys have anything else to talk about the imagery?
I'm about done there.
Stickman 87. When Morgan's Rifle Corps was reformed prior to Saratoga, how were those men selected? Would they already had rifles, or were they equipped with them at that point? So, from what I remember, the 7th Virginia sent a rifle company, so they would have had their own rifles with them.
Yeah.
And that would have been pretty consistent for the rest of the corps of riflemen up there.
Yeah, they're going to be drawing from those rifle companies, from these Continental regiments, from new volunteers that are going to be rifle equipped, people like that.
So Virginia builds a rifle company into the regular regiment at a certain time, and North Carolina does the same. So when they provide rifle companies, you can detach a company of riflemen to head north.
Yeah, and you're effectively doing what the British are doing with their light battalions and their grenadier battalions. You're making a conglomerated unit from different companies from different regiments.
Here's a YouTube video idea right there. Specialist companies of the American Revolution, riflemen, lights, grenadiers.
I'm trying to remember who is it. I think it might be Brandon F. does a good video on the light infantry.
Yeah,
that's a great video. Yeah, I was about to say, like, no, I'm not gonna touch that. He's already taken that. Robert Edwards, I apologize, I came late. No, it's all good. This kind of came around haphazardly, so don't worry about that. Hopefully, we'll get some sort of regular schedule for this moving forward, and we can post it out a couple days in advance. So don't worry, this will happen again. Just getting started researching early American history. Your wealth of information is very interesting. Where do you start to learn more about our history? So it's kind of easier on the East Coast because all of the history is around us. But that being said,
I'm not going to make many friends amongst academia for saying this, but a great place to start is Wikipedia. Go to their sources section. And then a lot of times they list out the sources that are used or the ones that are cited there. And then start looking for books based on what you're wanting to look at. Like, our stuff, we have Rifles of Colonial America. We have Moravian gun making. We have both of DeWitt Bailey's books about British military arms, of sorts of provincials. Then you start looking for whatever your specific niche is. The other thing is trying to hunt down primary sources, especially for us here in North Carolina. One thing we use a lot is Doc South. It's through the University of North Carolina system. They scan in a lot of original or firsthand sources, and they're digitized. makes it a 1,000 times easier to read and to actually search these things. Looking around online, there's for clothing, there's descriptions of runaway ads, and then there's been a lot of great information put out. So go through your your usual like academic practice of like filtering through information and comparing, contrasting to figure out what's good information and what's a pile of horse hockey. I mean, you just kind of got it. You put in the work, you put in the time, and you start to look different sources. Primary sources to me are always going to be our best, and then looking for things that compile those.
Yeah, same thing here. My advice is don't study all of early American history. Choose a niche, choose what you want to, and go from there. There are people to help you. I mean, message us on Facebook, or message. Now I'm going to speak for Andrew. Message me on Facebook. I'd be glad to help you. That there are people to talk to, people to help you, but your friends' primary sources. Doc South is great. Colonial Williamsburg. There are things that they do I don't agree with, but that said, they document everything. So that's a great place to go. MESDA, Museum of Southern Decorative Arts, is in Old Salem. These people were Germans. They documented everything. So great documents down, especially for the Southern United States in MESDA. Up north, I can't speak as much, but Library of Congress. I'll be honest, I've pulled stuff from there. So
up north, a lot of these small towns, they have historical societies.
Yep.
So start looking at the historical societies. So if you're interested in the Battle of Lexington Green, the historical societies around there are going to be great. Oh, Raleigh, 8-volume set, American History of American History by Benjamin Andrews. Interesting. I'll have to take a look at that.
Yep.
So yeah, a lot of us, we go very broad with not a lot of depth, and then we'll pick a few things that we'll dig deep on.
Yeah.
One thing I found pretty interesting is thankfully a lot of this document they're short. Like just this contract, right? So the rifleman contract is only 4 paragraphs, and it says resolved 6 companies, expert riflemen raised in Pennsylvania, 2 in Maryland, 2 in Virginia. And it says that company consists captain, 3 lieutenants, 4 sergeants, 4 corporals, a drummer, a trumpeter, 68 privates. Each company shall march and join. They'll go over the pay, and they said they'll be there for the next year. Like it's all just condensed. So I personally, sometimes if I'm reading contemporary records or primary source, I'll take it and I'll put it into AI to like hit me with the main points. So I use that a lot because sometimes how they write, my brain doesn't quite necessarily line up with how they write, but you can take that information and throw it into an AI and just like summarize that. And then once you have it summarized, you can go back and read the primary, and then it will appear to you. So that's something I've found personally quite useful.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you on the way they write, because one thing I've been doing a lot lately is reading through pension applications. So Ben and I have an ancestor that we don't exactly know when he died. He was either killed at the Battle of Camden, died shortly thereafter, or lives until sometime around the time of Guilford Courthouse. Because like I have the state that doesn't even take place until much later. So, but the last mentions of him I see that I can prove are him are around before Guilford Courthouse. So I've been reading pension applications because, usually one of those things that would be, very good to mark you at a position is like, oh yeah, we were at this battle engaged, near, said we were engaged near here. Captain Starnes was killed. That would be a good indication of like, oh yeah, I was actually here. I saw that.
But it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I won't say it doesn't exist. I have yet to be able to find it.
Robert, so I don't know if you've used Wikipedia too much, but at the bottom there will be a link to sources or what pages they're pulling it from. So that's what you can kind of use that and go and read from the source that the Wikipedia pulls from. Definitely, that's the kind of the intro. Yeah. And Jeff and Leslie also said one of their ancestors served in the North Carolina militia and came to Kentucky in the 1790s. There was a comment a little bit Turkey. Somebody made the comment about Lewis and Clark expedition and about how useful that is.
Journal of Lewis and Clark gives insight into what a military
Yeah.
expedition would have taken along. Yeah, that um, one more source for stuff in the South, especially for us, is Woodmason's diary. He does not have a lot of kind things to say, but he also doesn't pull any punches, which is nice.
Yeah. For Revolution specifically, you have Joseph Plum Martin's great diary. A lot of the northern campaigns. Captain Avald's, he was a Jaeger captain. Diary's great. I love reading it because he's funny. I mean, he cracks jokes in his writing all the time. I mean, and then, like estate records are great to look at for material culture. 18th century material culture slideshows page. Their website, absolutely great for material culture. For what did this axe look like? What did this bottle look like?
I was gonna say, if you have a pile of fabric or deep pockets, stay off of that site because you will want things made.
Yeah, I fell into that trap.
I get in trouble on that one a lot because I've got friends of mine that are tailors and stuff. It's like, hey, I need this, 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 and this, and it's like, oh yeah, and I'm sitting there going, okay, now how am I going to pay for this?
So why did the American long rifle become such an iconic symbol, American symbol?
I think it goes back to what we had talked about in the beginning. It started out, these guns in the hands of the right people could be great, but they could be just as useless as a gun. They could be just as useless as a stick in the hands of the guy who didn't know what to do with it. But it was a propaganda thing. Andrew talked about the references of the guys writing to their sweethearts, talking about being killed by the famed American rifleman, and they get over here and like, these guys suck. So, but that story that still holds, and I think that's something that also develops later. You see a lot, as much as you see an American long rifle used in the Revolution, you see them used a lot more in 1812. And in my opinion, to a somewhat better effect, because then America has rifle companies that have been trained, mostly with the pattern 1803. So so that is a holdover from the Revolution, and I think it stays not only in the American mythos, but it stays in the European mythos as well, to the point that there are collectors in Germany who are collecting original American long rifles. And people are fascinated by this gun throughout the world.
And to kind of go just, a step further than that, looking past the era we usually portray, you look at how these schools that of long rifle building expand, and everybody gets their own, everybody starts to have their own style. These pieces become a lot more prolific after the American Revolution, and like you said before, and into the War of 1812. So by that point in time, that's a well ingrained part of American culture. So, even as much as something else that we're both wearing here, we're both wearing I think Ben's wearing a hunting shirt.
Yep, I'm wearing a hunting shirt.
Yeah, so we're both wearing hunting shirts. This is, a common garment to wear in the backwoods of Virginia or in the Carolinas that doesn't go up north until these riflemen arrive. And then now all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, the guys with the guys with the rifles also wear this, they can shoot. Washington starts talking about wanting to make this the uniform so that, they think every man a rifleman. You look at propaganda posters from Germany and England, or the Holy Roman Empire at the time, and England, places like this, that depict the savage American as this, large bearded, half Sasquatch looking thing wearing a hunting shirt and carrying a rifle. So it becomes kind of the caricature of America. And, we do the same thing we did with Yankee Doodle. We're just like, cool, this is ours now, we're going to use it.
And something else I'd like to point out is the American long rifle To my knowledge, the last guy who was building them full time in what we would call the original line of guys, the unbroken line of gun builder to gun builder to gun builder, he's in North Carolina. He's in the area of what's now Greensboro, North Carolina, or well, hell, it was then Greensboro, North Carolina. He stopped in 1921. In the contemporary long rifles, that movement starts in the 1940s, and he's one of the guys who teaches the people who bring the long rifle back. So it took a 20-year hiatus. It was something that was always there, even if it was, just a few guys making them in the backwoods of Appalachia and a few guys making them in the Piedmont of the Carolinas. They were always there. So, it was something that never really left. We've made them from 1750 to today.
And that's just to read a comment here I'm seeing. It says lots of talk about military use, but most were tools used for feeding the family. Part of the reason we're talking about the military use is kind of the direction that Revere wants to go with the channel here. Talking about these military arms, the recent collab he did with History Rebels, great video there and another great channel. And us being, doing a live in history, ultimately at the end of the day, that's what brings a lot of the crowds of people out, and that's what gets a lot of people hooked. And then from there we go down, we start talking about like, okay, well, these rifle companies, why do all these guys know how to use these rifles, and why do they have these rifles? Yeah, at the end of the day, these are the pieces they're using. They're going out, they're hunting rifles. They're going out to feed their family. You have market hunters, long hunters in different eras of time. So yeah, ultimately these are tools meant to go out hunting animals that are pressed into a military use. And that's in a lot of ways where they gain their fame worldwide, is in that military use. But yeah, we don't hit on as much here because of like the direction of the channel and the direction of a lot of the stuff we deal with. Like if I'm sitting, like we were this weekend at 96, we're sitting looking at a reconstruction of the fort from the first siege. Okay, people are showing up to a military site, or if I'm sitting at Kings Mountain, people are showing up there going, oh, well, how was the rifle used in the battle, or how are these, how are the rifles used? And it's like that's usually always a part of the discussion of like, number one, this is the gun I brought from home. This is what I used to hunt with. This is what I used to feed my family. Or, in the case of people like market hunters and long hunters, this is what I used to make my living.
Yep.
Where's the best source to research originals? Do they show up? Sometimes I don't really follow them too much on the auctions. Because you just came back from the CLA show, right?
CLA show, the Kentucky Rifle Association. They have they're an association of collectors. I think they own the majority of the originals that are existing. You want to see pictures? Moravian gun building books, both of those are great, have great pictures. I have them sitting right here. Yeah, my camera just sucks and you can't see pictures very well on this thing. RCA, like we keep talking, Rifles of Colonial America has the best pictures of early American long rifles, period. The older ones were made in the 70s. They're black and white, still great pictures. I have one of the in color versions. Came out, I think 2 years ago. It was $160. Yeah, last year. It was $160, probably the best $160 I've spent as far as research, period. Because you can see stuff that you can't see with the black and white photos. Like, this carving is a little bit deeper here. Maybe I need to shade a little bit over here through engraving. So that comes in handy. And there are talks of the volume 2, which focuses mainly on Southern guns. There's talks of it coming out in the next year or so.
And go ahead. I was gonna say, I know we've said the CLA a few times. Let me make sure of that. That's the Contemporary Long Rifle Association. They have a great web presence. They host and sponsor a lot of classes for people that want to get into building. Then you have things like the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. It's an amazing museum. They have lots of wonderful original rifles on display. Museums in Colonial Williamsburg, Yorktown Museum. So these museum collections, a lot of them have great high resolution photos online. So that's a good place to start looking there. and like you said, RCA, some of the best.
There's lots of artistic. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm just saying. And if you're really interested in just studying these guns or maybe getting into building, I would suggest both the American Long Rifle Forum and the Muzzleloading Forum. Some of these builders, take that back. Most of these builders own original guns, and they love to show them off. They love to send pictures. And if you want to get into building, talk to those guys on there, and I obviously am going to tell you to go. If you're looking for a kit, go get a Jim Chambers kit, or hey, go to a class. Andrew and I attended a class 2 years ago in Carrollton, Ohio. There were guys there who had been building rifles for 20 years and were almost masters who were going to refine the craft. And then there were guys who had never touched a chisel, never touched a block of wood, and they were taught how to build guns by masters. So, this thing isn't as hard and it isn't as inaccessible as it seems. I mean, a 16-year-old kid did it.
That's like, and made, absolutely beautiful piece. An absolutely beautiful piece is that 16-year-old kid you're talking about. Let's see. I see a couple of. Oh, okay, not you. I've seen your first gun.
Appreciate it, dude.
Hey, I've seen your first gun. It's down in the basement.
No, that's gun number 2. First gun's sitting over here. It will never see the light of day ever again. It's a parts gun, but it is.
When I was talking about some we've seen, like in videos about Kempton, some of these kids, some of these younger guys that are getting in and making some absolutely beautiful pieces to start with. It's definitely a widespread hobby, and then there's a few guys that go above and beyond that we luckily I love this. Nobody wants to see my first one. Yeah, my first one's in the basement, actually it's in your basement.
In my basement. Yeah.
Oh, good. We have mutual blackmail on each other right now.
Yeah.
So let's see. What was this question here? I see. Around what year was the brass patch box on the buttstock introduced?
Not a clue. 1750. You'll see them every now and then. They become something that is pretty common, or I don't say common. You see them really starting to become prevalent in 1770, but you see them as early as 1750. By about 1790, they're ubiquitous. You'll see a wooden one there every now and then, but the majority are brass.
And the brass patch boxes are uniquely American, you can say.
Yeah, I see them starting in America. Obviously, you'll have something like the Baker rifle. We'll have them later on, and then the Brunswick. But I think they start in the Americas. I do not see them any later.
I was also going to say if you go to www.longrifle.com, that's the CLA website. You go to Artist Works. I can't speak. That's a good resource too if you want to find a flintlock.
Yep.
So
hey guys, I'm sorry. I have a dog barking in the background. Y'all mind if I dip out for a second to go get her in here? She was trying to get in the room. All right, I'll be right back.
I'll meet you. But no, if you want to see some pieces on www.longrifle.com, that's a good place to get access to amazing flintlocks.
And like Ben said, the Muzzleloading Forum and American Long Rifle Forum. Do we have any primary source accounts of what people kept in their patch boxes? Sorry, I just saw this question pop up. I'm new to the live stream thing, so I just follow the chat. So yeah, we do have some where we find the rifles that still have stuff in them. So like earlier in the live stream, I mentioned I have a reproduction powder measure. I think it's in my truck, but it was based off of one that was found in a patch box of an Austrian Jaeger from 1768. So yeah, poking around, there's pictures. Like if they open up rifles, it's like, oh yeah, there's a worm in here. There's patches. There's a powder measure, extra flints. So yeah, that we have pictures of what we find in them. You have to poke around online. None of them are coming off the top of my head right now. But and then if you start poking around these sites that we've mentioned and pictures, you'll start to see more stuff mentioned of those primary sources of what was found in those patch boxes.
I've unmuted you there, Ben.
Thank
I have
you.
the power.
Thank you. Sorry.
I also got rid of that banner thing on the bottom. So
Yeah, finally. Yeah.
welcome to the show. What else you guys want to keep going on for another 10 minutes or so? Like I said, we can always come back, do another episode. What time is it for you guys over there? 9?
I can go for a few more minutes, but I don't have long.
No, yeah, let's go for another 10 minutes, and then so if anyone has any questions, get them in now. We'll be closing out.
Let's see. Good question come through here. Pre-cut patch is a thing, or is it rolled up and patching material? Square versus round patches? Yes.
Yeah.
To all of those. So yeah, pre-cut patches were a thing sometimes. You could also see strips of patching tied off to bags. So if you're using pre-cut, round is usually preferred. In a pinch, those ones cut off of strips, of course, are going to be square or somewhat rectangular.
And you have to keep in mind the main point of the patch is to create a good seal for the gases to push the ball and for the ball to grip the rifling. So just so that happens, you're gonna have a better, or just so that happens, it doesn't so much matter the shape, but round is pretty common in the period.
So, and yeah, like you said, because at the end of the day, if I'm shooting a 50 caliber rifle, I'm not shooting a .500 caliber ball. I'm usually shooting like a .49. So I need that, you need that patching material to fill up that extra space in something that's squishy in a way that allows it to flex and be compressed around that ball. That's later replaced and superseded by, the cup at the end of the mini ball that's invented, in the 19th century, that allows that lead skirt to grip the rifling as opposed to the powder or the patching and the ball itself. Let's see. Mention you're on Facebook. He's Ben Starnes and I'm Andrew Dixon, so you can look us up on Facebook. Like I said,
I'm dressed like this on Facebook.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I'm dressed like this on Facebook. I honestly do not remember.
I can share to the Revero 311 Facebook page as well.
Also, like we said at the very beginning of the stream, Ben and I are both a member of the same reenacting unit. So I'm the captain of the Lincoln County Militia. We portray, North Carolina militia from 1775 to about 1782, when you start to see the stuff really winding down here in the South.
We will branch off into other impressions as well. We've done Virginia Rifleman before, which the clothing and stuff really doesn't change, and we'll even do a loyalist unit every now and then, depending on what's needed at an event.
And by saying the other thing we mentioned is we do British Lights, so look up the 15th Regiment of Foot. Most of them are out of New Jersey and New York. There's a few of us here that form what we have lovingly termed the Southern Detachment. So yeah, hit up. You can hit them up, hit us up, depending on where you're at. Oh, and Hardy, you just opened a can of worms. Thoughts on short starters?
What'd he do?
Thoughts on short starters?
Okay, so historically, I'm not finding short starters. This is just me. I'm not finding short starters in the 1770s. I take that back. I found 2, and they're both in target shooting kits from Britain. So like they had shooting clubs, and they would have short starters. And we had a conversation with a gentleman this weekend talking about short starters, and he made the point that cone barrels, which is how the majority of the American rifles are done in the 18th century, the barrel is actually relieved up top, and the muzzle is cone, so you can start the ball with your thumb. He made the point that, when shooting, it might open your group up some, which is true. It does. It kind of hurts your accuracy some, but like Andrew said, his rifle is coned, and he was taking it. I've seen him take that gun out to 200 yards. That said, you just historically, you don't find them. especially in our period. They'll come around later. You'll find them. I start seeing them pop up about 1815, right after the War of 1812, and that's about the time you stop seeing cone barrels in here.
And like you said, some of the other places you see them are like English shooting matches. So these things where you want to effectively do something like modern day PRS shooting. You need to build an accuracy machine. You're building effectively a flintlock bench rest gun.
Yep.
So, yeah, you want that because you want the tightest possible fit you can get. And, Hardy's comment there, heard loads were a bit looser back then, combined with cone barrel, short starters wouldn't have been needed. Yeah, you hit the nail pretty well on the head there.
Yep.
I absolutely love shooting with a cone barrel. Yeah, it does open my group up a little bit, but especially, and to kind of go back to the hunting thing of, okay, it opens my group up from the size of a baseball to the size of a softball at 150 yards or 100 yards. That is still enough. I mean, even if, and it might open to the size of a basketball at 200. Cool. That's still enough to put down a deer or an elk with a shot that I want to put on it, and a good shot.
Yeah.
And
do we want to go ahead? Do we want to go ahead and hit the priming horns before that comes up too?
Well, I do want to kind of finish something here. He's kind of spamming comments here, and I like it because he's hitting some good points. Most people even had rifles here were probably blasting deer at 50, 75 yards. Don't really need pinpoint accuracy. I mean, around where I'm at, yeah, you can get shots of 75, 100 yards. So it really means what do you want with pinpoint accuracy. So, yeah, I can hit a 12-inch plate at 100 yards with a smoothbore. But I can hit a sheet of paper at 150 yards consistently, or something, half a sheet of paper at 100 yards consistently with a rifle. So, especially in a deer hunting or elk or anything like that, yeah, I want to be able to have a more consistent's the word, but also a more precise shot that I want to make a number one, a clean, ethical kill, and number one, and number two, one that I don't have to go tracking through the woods for a couple hours, especially if you're hunting in hot weather.
And something else you'll find, and again, I'm speaking from the North Carolina perspective, the Piedmont down here was grassland for the most part because the Indians had burned it off for hundreds of years, which is why you're seeing things like bison or you see what's effectively plains bison and elk, in western North Carolina, as far west, I'm finding them as far west as Salem. But by the time of the Revolution, you're right. There's a lot of forest, and I'm not saying that all of the Piedmont was burnt off. There were still a lot of old growth forest around. So yeah, you're shooting there are times you're shooting 150, maybe 200 yards at an elk or a bison or a deer, and then there are times that you're shooting 25, 50, 75 yards of the deer. So it just depends on where you're hunting, but you have the opportunity to kill both.
Yeah, but I say some of them times it's not but the hand of God and a 62 caliber flintlock at 50 yards.
Yeah.
Do you want to handle the Mateo Viking question there, Andy?
So let's see. Would the riflemen also be responsible for their own bullets during the war due to various bore sizes? Yes. Yep. So like we said a couple of times, looking through archaeological digs in the same site, I see rifles ranging from 36 to about 68, 70 caliber. You can't feasibly keep all of those in a military stock. And also, looking, especially here, we speak in the Southern Campaign a lot. Number one, you're already doing that with the gun you brought from home. Number two, these militia laws, it's like, okay, you have to show up with a pound of powder and a pound of shot sized to the bore of your gun. And then number three, yeah, you're just not going to have buckets of musket balls or rifle balls for 36 calibers if like 5 guys in the company have them. And each one of these, it's okay, that 36 caliber might really be like a 37 caliber or something like that. So yeah, these guys are making their own. And go ahead.
I was gonna say something interesting. When I was at the ASAC conference, I talked to a gentleman from Springfield Armory. And Springfield during the American Revolution was a laboratory factory. So they actually rolled tens of thousands, it might be into the hundreds of thousands of military cartridges, and they would put them in barrels. That was something I kind of want to talk about in the video in the future is just because in my mind that's just not how I imagined that for some reason. But like they're mass producing rolled paper cartridges for the military.
Yep.
Because I asked them specifically about did they make an annotation between buck and ball or ball, and they didn't. They just said cartridges.
That's
so-
some good research.
Yeah, and if it's if you're making stuff for the Continental Army where it's like, okay, these regiments are armed with purchased French guns, or these guys are armed with captured English guns, okay, it's going to be nominal 69, nominal 75 caliber bore, so you can make military loads that are going to be say 62 caliber for the French gun and 69 caliber for the British for the 75 caliber, because they're so undersized. You can mass produce these things. If I drop a 62 caliber ball down a 70 caliber rifle, it's just not gonna, it's gonna make a mess of things.
Yeah.
And real quick, while we got a couple of minutes, Hardy does want to hear about priming horns, so Ben, I will let you get on your soapbox on that one.
Okay. What we hear, or we've got a lot of questions about priming horns, especially recently in the reenacting community. I'm not finding, it's kind of like short starters, I'm not finding them historically. I am finding day horns. Difference being priming horns tend to be a little bit smaller, and then they tend to be a 19th century invention, simply for priming the pan, filled with finer powder to prime the pan. We do see them in the 16th century 16th century, because they're shooting matchlocks, and their charges are contained in, I don't know the name of them, but they're contained in
a bandolier.
Yeah, there you go. In a bandolier in little wooden tubes. So they exist then, but you see things like hunting scenes in drawings and in engravings, and these guys are carrying bags, but they're not carrying horns. So where are they getting their powder? Well, there's two options. These guys are rich enough to hire a loader who's carrying their horn with them, but sometimes you can see the loader, and the loader's not carrying a horn. So where are they getting their powder? In a lot of German bags and a lot of English bags, you're finding horns that are about a foot long, 10 inches long, that'll hold enough powder for about 10 shots. And if you're hunting on horseback, especially if you're rich, that's about all you're shooting. If you're shooting that much, it's been a very, very, very good day, or you are in a very, very bad situation. So you just historically do not see them for the 18th century. You do see them later. You do see them earlier. It's kind of like beards. You see them later. You see them earlier. They just don't really exist in our time as priming horns.
So I'm seeing a couple more cool questions hop in. Hunters hopping back in. Aim small, miss small. What sights typically win on rifles? Rear sights. Yes, rear sights on rifles.
Yep.
Rear sights are necessary for being able to fully use the accuracy of a rifle. You're going to see basically what we would now call like a notch and post. Think Glock sights, or think pistol sights. It's those, but spread further apart, so they're going to be very they're going to be open sights. The long barrels do provide.
Go ahead. You'll see flip up like these sights on German guns.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. That was going to be the next thing I was going to say was the flip up sights you see on some of these rifles. The 76 I think has them. The German guns, some American guns have them. It's like, okay, we have a different range setting. So it's like an adjustable sight on a later military surplus, on a military rifle in the 20th century or even the 19th century. Like I know you're familiar with Hunter, the ladder sights on an Enfield. It's those, but instead of having the ladder, you just have two settings. You have like setting A and setting B. So like on a rifle for me around here where I hunt, setting A might be 50 yards and setting B might be 100.
There's a comment about logistics. How much of a logistical nightmare was keeping the British uniformed? Seemed like every group has amassed really different clothes. I don't know how the poor quartermasters kept their sanity. Well, it seems like you want to talk about this, Andy, or do you want to, Ben? Ben, if you have to.
Ben, if you got to drop off, me and Revere can keep going for a while.
Yeah, I got school in the morning, so yeah, I got to drop off you guys. All right, I'll talk to y'all later.
Talk to you later.
See you, man.
So yeah, as far as keeping the British uniformed, yeah, it's definitely a logistical nightmare. They did make it easier by having number one, they by this time they had a system in place. They had the clothing warrant of 1768. So you knew what the regiments are supposed to look like. They're supposed to be equipped in a certain way, and then the colonels of the regiment are footing a lot of this bill, equipping their companies, and then each of these guys each of these regiments have their own like lace pattern and facing color. So yeah, it does get to be a right pain, but also you would see, the regiment would be purchasing coats and they would be sent in. It would be, roughly sized. And then inevitably somebody in the regiment was a tailor in their life before the military, so they're able to closer tailor these coats to get the good 18th century fit. But yeah, supplies ultimately were one of the biggest problems the British had in the war, because everything had to come from an ocean away. It's similar to what we had to deal with in the World Wars, where everything's an ocean away going the other direction, except we had the much different manufacturing capability. So once you got further from those ports, and again, I'll speak more so to the Southern campaign. They come in through Savannah and Charleston. Charleston falls in 1780, and then they start trying to push into the backcountry. Well, congratulations. If you're not actively occupying something, the militia's going to show back and they're going to make your life pretty much a nightmare. It's one of the few things I do like out of the Patriot that does play well, is ambushing supply columns. And as Cornwallis's army's pushing through Charlotte and in 1780 and September of 1780. But then, October of 1780, they're falling back to Winnsboro, South Carolina, because every time they send a foraging expedition out to find food, these guys are coming up with more wounded than food. And he says he stirred up a hornet's nest of rebellion. So yeah, that is ultimately one of the major things that wins the war for the Americans, is just being able to wreak havoc on British supply lines in the South and forcing them to take hold and occupy ground in order to make it useful ground. Because if they leave, much like later insurgencies, that's effectively a lot of what's being fought in the South is what at the time's called La Petite Guerre, the Little War. And in the peninsula later in the Napoleonic Wars, it picks up the name guerrilla warfare. So that's what you're seeing, and that's where a lot of these nightmares come in handy. So yeah, in short answer, yes, it was a nightmare. And long answer can go a lot longer than that. There's many volumes written on it, and much better sources than I. I know we've mentioned Brandon F. a couple of times. I know he's done a lot of great stuff about kind of the logistics and supply. So I would definitely recommend talking reaching out and broadening your scope of who you ask, because that's not really my kettle of fish there.
For books, this is a great one. Covers the American Army. It's called Supplying Washington's Army by Erna Risch, and that covers the operations of the quartermasters, ordnance, clothing, and hospital departments of the commissariat. It came out in like the 1940s. I think it's from like a U.S. Army publication, but I've used that book before. There's a really cool insight in there that I read about. They would tell the battalions to switch guns to make sure you had guns of the same caliber. So if this regiment had French muskets and this one had a mix, like, hey, give up some of your French muskets for English muskets, or English muskets for French muskets. But one of the books that I just sent a PDF in the chat, so that kind of covers supplying at least the American side. But yeah, logistics is a continuous problem, but also super interesting history.
Let's see. Good question here. With the original rifle sights being so small, you think they're actually drawing a bead on the target or doing more point shooting when at closer range? As far as with a flintlock, I've had the privilege to shoot a couple of originals owned by some friends of mine. They're exactly right. Those sights are tiny. That being said, as far as hunting, a hunting purpose goes, or anything, Anything outside of like maybe 25 yards, yeah, you're definitely going to draw a bead. Under that, yeah, you can definitely snap shoot a little bit more, and especially with a with smooth bores, you're really going to be about the same at 25 yards as you are with a rifle. So you can effectively snap shoot. But yeah, much longer than that, yeah, you're going to be drawing a bead on the target, and you're going to be taking, especially if this is what you have to do to feed your family, you want to have as a highest certainty as you can to put food on the table. So yeah, you're going to draw that bead on a target.
Joseph Plum Martin has a.
Give me just a second here.
Beat you. Joseph Plum Martin has a comment where he takes aim at not him, but an American, which might be a wall gun, shoots across the Hudson at a British sentry. So that's always a pretty good reference.
Yeah, I've heard that one as well. There's one that I've heard quoted, but I need to actually hunt it down and get eyes on it. Supposedly like an 800-yard shot from Captain Avold at the Siege of Charleston.
Oh, the German? Avold?
Yeah, Captain Avold of.
Okay.
What we got here?
Robert Edwards, as I've been listening to you guys, I have to wonder if the filming of The Patriot with Mel Gibson, do you think it was accurately produced? Generally considered not accurately produced. I find it a fun movie. I enjoy the visual of it. There's Patrick O'Kelly.
Yeah.
He was like Patrick O'Kelly's pretty big in the reenacting community. He's written a book about Marion's orderly, so he's well established. He actually was on the set with The Patriot, and he said, like, basically at the last month or so, they brought in some new guy that wanted to make it more flashy, and it kind of took away a lot of the historical accuracy of the battles. But yeah, it's generally viewed as
the battles are objectively terrible. Even down to the attitudes they have. They make Tavington, or they make Charlton into the character of Tavington, and they, make him this appalling devil in the saddle that you didn't see even from, what was called, the quote unquote bloody ban in the war. So they definitely play it up as a big pro America, this thing, and they lean into every aspect of the American mythos that at the end of the day is just that. It's myth.
It's a fun myth.
Oh, definitely a fun myth. I do like me some John Ford Westerns, though. It's the same thing as watching The Patriot. It's kind of a suspension of disbelief. Sorry, I just see the Hardy's chat here. Good question. Here, is game more or less plentiful back then? Here in the Midwest, I've heard deer populations is at pre-Columbus levels. So in the 18th century, by the time of the American Revolution, bison have been pretty much hunted out east of the Appalachians. Elk are in process of being hunted out in Carolinas, which they've been reintroduced. And one day I was driving up in the mountains and actually saw a herd of them standing out in the field. It was beautiful. I think they're actually starting to do lottery tags now for elk hunting in the Carolinas again. So some of it was more plentiful, some of it was less, and especially in the 19th century and the Midwest further out, you look at what happens to the bison in the 19th century, mule deer, mountain goats, pronghorn, anything. A lot of these were really nearly hunted out. You see pictures of the piles of buffalo skulls from the 19th century, that conservation and a lot of it starting with guys like Teddy Roosevelt bring back. And some of the biggest conservationists nowadays in America are actually hunters. One of the things like the Pittman-Robertson Act that actually helps fund wildlife conservation in North America or in the United States has allowed these animals to come back to these levels that that we would have seen in sometimes pre-Columbian times to into the 18th century. Like, there are generations in North Carolina of not having elk, and then we get to see those again. So yeah, it depends on what you were talking about. Some of it there was more, some of it there was less. And we've done a lot over the last 150 years to bring back these animals that our ancestors survived for relied on for food, and then now we get to come back and actually hunt these animals and for food, for sport. And even sport hunting, you're still using everything in the animal you can if you're an ethical hunter.
The
But that
I was gonna say Lewis and Clark. Interesting. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Andy. You
Oh,
can.
go ahead.
I was gonna say Lewis and Clark expedition is pretty interesting because they make mention of how many bears they see, like
Hmm.
on the way out, and then this is also the time of who's the story of the Revenant based on? He gets mauled by a bear in basically modern day Nebraska.
Oh, give me just a second. I'll pull it up. Is it Hugh Glass?
Hugh Glass, yeah. So the Revenant movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, based
Yeah.
off Hugh Glass, but he's getting, I think that's in Nebraska or South Dakota, yeah. So I just
Um.
recently was listening to podcasts about Lewis
Well,
and
you have
Clark, and then just how much they run into bears and the white
them. You
tailor.
have guys like Jim Bridger, Kit Carson, guys like that. Teddy Roosevelt reading his life, and looking later in the 19th century about some of the stuff of him going out and hunting bison, and then a lot of that, you can see that change from like, oh crap, these things are everywhere, to Teddy Roosevelt kind of having that realization of like, oh, I may have killed the last one. Let's see.
Robert Edwards. Actually, you can melt. Ooh, did they melt pewter? Those would be pewter soldiers, right? You most make those little
Yeah,
things.
pewter at the time did have lead in it, but it's something that's kind of made for a point of the movie with the melting down toy soldiers. You can do it. I don't know why you would want to.
You can melt down silver and take out Wolverines. I've always thought about doing that for a Halloween video.
It will change. It would shift your point of impact.
Silver?
Yep,
If you
it'll
melt
shift
it?
your point of impact because it's different grain weight for bore size. It will actually shift your point of. We did it with a buddy of mine as a joke one time.
I can't hit anything anyway, so it's not really going to shift my point of impact I'm missing. Maybe I'll hit. Yeah, that was a good conversation we had for the long form last year, right? Like you were talking about, you can literally, that was the myths of the 18th century, but you can melt it, you can basically shoot it.
Yeah, if you can melt it, you can shoot it. It's just, is it prudent to do that, and are you going to have those? It's one of those things. It's just, ultimately, did it happen? Probably. In that movie, was it to look good for Hollywood? Yes.
Someone does it as a YouTube short and they have millions of views on it. I was like, that's a good idea. I saw it. Does a little message guns or something. Everything was lead. I can usually watch a movie and just put the historical inaccuracies down to Hollywood, but I've tried 3 times to watch The Revenant and just can't watch it. It's just really, really bad. Turkey Creek, you don't like the battle in the beginning? I don't know. I found it is 30 minutes too long of a movie. I will say that. But The Revenant, there's a
I'll
lot
be
of
honest.
Leonardo DiCaprio, but
I'll be honest. I don't remember. I don't think I've ever actually watched The Revenant.
it's good for a long flight. They have
Long
a
flights, I'm
fun
usually
little, I'll send you
sleeping.
the battle scene on Facebook, but they have a fun little like they get attacked by Akara Indians.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Uh, yeah, it looks like 1823. Sorry, I'm just kind of poking back and forth here.
Yeah, they were a big group. So I was just out at the Museum of the Fur Trade in Pinedale, Wyoming, at the rendezvous out there. And so I was learning about fur trade, and I didn't had actually record some content. I haven't posted it yet. But yeah, learning about the fur trading companies that they would send out and how they were contract. And yeah, you would make a lot of money as a fur, like going out and doing trapping, but then everything costs so exponentially more. So it's kind
Well,
of
and
like
I was gonna say, and the same thing with long hunters and market hunters in the era we talk about. They would go out in groups. You didn't go out as a solo person, especially out across the proclamation line. Um, you didn't go out solo. That was not going to be a good day. Even in small groups, sometimes you would have a problem to the point like surveyors are going out with like armed men as well, just to pull chain, depending on where they're going. Because
Sure.
as my family learned, fighting the Shawnee, getting jumped by the Shawnee is not a good day for anybody involved.
Turkey Creek. The battle is just so far off from the real story. I have to admit I don't know the real story, so I'm sure that's absolutely correct. And then I thought silver was only for vampires. You are correct.
Uh,
That's why it would be a
uh,
Halloween video.
Silver's for werewolves.
Silver's for werewolves.
Yep. I love watching old Universal horror movies. So the beginning of the Wolfman with Lon Chaney Jr. That's what he beats the werewolf with, is a silver-headed cane.
I'm gonna shoot a book with a silver bullet. It's not too expensive. I can get it back. Opinion on gods and generals, Civil War. I don't know if we talk about the. We don't go past
Mm-mm.
1800 on this
Yeah, so
channel.
let's not go past 1800 on this channel, especially with the two of us.
Yeah, we didn't know. Jeremiah. Well, you mean Jeremiah Johnson wouldn't have lived if he was just alone like that in the movie? What about rugged individualism? There is rugged individualism, but there's also companies. I have yet to make it to the Museum of the Fur Trade in Chadron, Nebraska. I have heard about this place, this mecca of a museum that is out in the plains of Nebraska. I have yet to make it. I have made it to the Museum of the Mountain Man. That's where it was, not the Museum of the Fur Trade. I got these mixed up. But yeah, because there's a lot of good trade guns at the Museum of the Fur Trade. I don't know if you've ever have you looked at where this is on locationally? It's like in the middle of nowhere.
I mean, I
It's
think most of Wyoming's the middle of nowhere. Like one of these days, I want to go out to the uh, Bill Cody Center of the West, and I know Cody, Wyoming is like in the scenic middle of nowhere, but still the middle of nowhere.
no, the Museum of the Fur Trade's in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, and I can, as an Iowan, the best parts of Nebraska touch Iowa because it's a very um yeah. Anything you really want to close on there, Andy? I think 2.5 hours is a good start.
Yeah,
I guess just to kind of wrap this up again before, even though I just offered Andy to do the closeout, I'll just do this little pitch here. I plan to do these a little bit more often. As you can see, I'm not around my collection, not making videos at the moment. So I'm going to try to bring on more experts to talk about just interesting history. I travel quite a bit for work, so trying to account for that time while also being engaged and learning. So I know Andy and I and Ben have talked a lot around the campfire at reenacting. So this is kind of a outgrowth of that because these conversations are fun. And yeah, Andy, if you want to kind of do the closeout, if
yeah.
you guys have
So
any questions, get them in. This is the end.
yeah, so just to kind of end up and close out here. This is part of the fun of reenacting. Yeah, it's cool to go out, shoot guns, make the loud noises, sit out in the night, sit around the fire, but sitting around the fire in the evening, hanging out with guys like Revere here, Ben and myself, the friends I've made over the last decade of this, that's a lot of the fun of reenacting. And also, everything we do, it's kind of a treasure hunt in a way as far as the research goes. Um, like I said, one of the things I do, I've got a hat here. I'll reach down and pull it down. It is an absolutely gaudy thing. It's a green hat with feathers of, red, blue, white, black. That is probably one of the most well-researched garments I have, because there's a painting from Diverger that shows a green hat, and it's like, okay, was this actually a thing? So then we start digging around, and then we start finding these little nuggets. It's like, oh yeah, these were actually a thing, so we made it. Or Matt Brinkle had him to make it. But that's some of the fun, is like the treasure hunt of reenacting, or research. There's the cliche, the real fun was the friends we made along the way. So there's a lot of great conversation, and anybody that's willing to travel out east, or that is a year out east. The 250 is going on right now. They started with Lexington and Concord earlier this year. The first land battle south of New England was 96 South Carolina. That's going to be November this year. I'm going to be in attendance there. Reach out and look us up on the Lincoln County Militia page to see where we're going, and if you're interested in joining. If you're regional to us, feel free, reach out to us, and we have our standards, and we're always willing to help guys get in the hobby. And if you're not, we can use, if you're not regional to us, we can usually either through mutual friends help find units to get you involved into the the journey of living history here.
Yeah. Turkey Creek, we'll close it out real quick. Museum of the Fur Trade video on his channel. And Hardy says, since 11 Bang Bang stopped doing streams, you seem to have picked up the torch. Well, I owe a lot to Ethan from 11 Bang Bang, because he really had me on a couple streams last year, really helped me out. So hopefully 11 Bang Bang gets back to making some streams. Or we'll have to do
I
another
still want to talk
video.
to him in person, or even if it's through something like this one of these days, I want to talk to him.
He's great.
You might have to see if you can reach out and get him and get the three of us on one day. That'll be entertaining.
I should do that. Yeah, I'll reach out to old Ethan. He's a good stuff. Always has wealth of knowledge, and he has all that knowledge from building all the stuff. That video with the wall gun. He'll always like, what piece should I make next? I'm like, man, you're just so far ahead of me on all this.
We've got a rifled wall gun on the project list to match some stuff made out in eastern North Carolina.
He's not too far. He's in Kansas, and I'm originally from Iowa, so you'll have to come out to the Midwest, Andy. Maybe we can all get together.
Yeah, you Iowa boys. There's one invention of Iowa that I want to see in North Carolina, and that's Casey's.
Well, with a reference to Casey's, because I think there was another Midwesterner. But yeah, we'll close out. We'll have another one of these in the next couple of weeks or sometime soon. I don't know. I'll try to actually post the video up on the channel a few days ahead, so you guys know it's coming up. Hit that little notification bell, and you'll be able to jump on. And so that way people knows it's coming. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us today on this discussion. Thanks to Andy. Thanks to Ben. It's awesome. I love learning. I got so many dumb questions to ask that you guys are always so patient with me. Live Ethan's wall gun. That would be awesome. But yeah, I'll just end the stream, Andy, and then we'll go backstage.
Sounds good.
All right. See you guys. Take care.